voluntary national review. So we have our four speakers, Tim from Cambodia and Rome from Vietnam, and then Hanil from Malaysia and Min from Singapore. Maybe you want to begin first? Okay. But you want to use the PowerPoint? I don't know.
No,
It's okay. You can. Okay. So let me begin with Hanil from Malaysia. Please introduce yourself briefly, and then give a key point. What's the key lessons you got from this experience?
Thank you, Bro. I am Panil from the PPM Activity Secretary Malaysia. So, in terms of Malaysian VNR, we have done twice. It's in 2017 and 2021. And one of the best lessons that we have in terms of VNR is whatever the outcome that we planned, as well as together with the Malaysian government, has flourished very well. Where after the VNR, we have this steering committee by the government was formed, and this followed by the formation of all-party parliamentary group Malaysia, specifically on sustainable development goals. That was a very big milestone formation in terms of localizing activities in Malaysia. And followed that, now we have VNR, voluntary local reviews to be presented here, first time in the HLPS. So that will be a very big milestone that I wish to have here. And pass the mic to
very good. Very short. As you know, the Malaysia, unlike other countries, Malaysia is the only country that they have multi-stakeholder board of the parliament. So in terms of parliament engagement, it's very interesting, and there are a lot of things to learn from Malaysian experience. Okay, let's go to another country online. We have seen from CPC Cambodia. She was in New York last month for highlight political forum. We are together in New York. See, could you please?
Yes.
Okay, yes, please.
Yes, yeah, he.
Anything now? It's okay?
Yes, for me, okay.
Yes, please. On mute, you can make the user name.
Oh, sorry, what you said? Salmo, what you have just said, I cannot hear it clearly.
You can speak now. You can go ahead. Please speak now.
Oh, my session now, right?
Application, you can speak about patient identification number one, your experience of VNR, especially you were in New York, July, right? Please share about your experience. What are the main lessons of your experience for VNR?
VNR, I will share about the VNR, yeah, from Cambodia.
Okay, are you here?
Sorry.
Okay, go ahead, please. What are the key lessons you learned from your engagement with the VNR in your country?
Sorry, it's almost again. I have a problem hearing you.
Okay, let me repeat. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah.
Better? I think we have received by weekend. So about the voluntary national review, your engagement. What are the key lessons you learned from your experience of engaging national review or SDGS? Okay, let's go to Maldives first.
Oh,
Let's go to Philippines.
uh,
Let's go to Philippines.
I think Marie, you also hear Asa more clearly, or only
I,
me?
you sound very far. You sound rather far. Can you repeat the question?
Type the question, please. Type it in the chat box, please.
Sorry, because I have also a problem hearing you. I know you're talking, but I cannot hear exactly the word. What is it? Yeah. It's like just only the sound. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, you cannot hear me. I cannot follow anymore. Question that are solved the following. Guiding decision number one. What did I say with you? Guiding decision number one. Okay, you have that fixed.
I think the first question is assessment of your government's VNR
Yes.
and obstacles and challenges as well as lessons.
Yes, right.
Okay. From Cambodia, just briefly share, because I think it's around 2 or 3 minutes allowed. So I quickly go through Cambodia experience. So normally we have only quite quick process back home from a voluntary national review to the input from civil society. But somehow I can rate it to a good comparing to the past 4 years, because it's engaged the civil society since the early stage, but the input is quite rush at the last stage. It means that we already collect input from civil society, and we're supposed to put it to Ministry of Planning, but they do not accept directly all the input from civil society. We have to send it to individual ministry, and this is the challenges during the VNR back home. And another challenges is the input. For example, we're gonna have all the detailed monitoring on the indicator of the input. Normally the challenge we raise, and it's around quite long, 80 pages, and the government gonna pick just very small proportion of what we request to. That's the second. And the last challenge is the short period of time during the voluntary national review, not back home, but to the high level political forum, because we're supposed to bring all the 80 pages to very short, only 10 pages, and all so very short to the high level political forum for the question only around 2 minutes. So it mainly only the question through to the panel of each government. That's what I observe the whole process. So the improvement point or the good point is we work collaboratively among civil society. So it's like we left no one behind. We share experience. We should support one another. So I think this is also a good learning process, not just VNR itself, but how harmonization, civil society and community-based as well as the indigenous groups be part of the voluntary national review from a civil society side. Thank you. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, team. And thank you very much for your sharing. Let's go to now the Maldives. You want to share now the Philippine leader, please.
Okay. In the Philippines, last year was the third time that we had a VNR, no? Third time that we submitted a voluntary national review. And our assessment of the government's report, no? We are quite dissatisfied. And why do I say that? In terms of the vision that they put forward, it is quite good, although the original vision that they came out with was also problematic, but we engaged them until the vision that they finally came out with was much closer to what we were seeing in civil society. However, there is a big gap between the vision that they put forward and the strategies that they employed in order to realize the vision. Because the starting point of their strategy departed from the premise that the private sector is the engine of development, then much of their programs around education and health really meant increasing the role of the private sector in the provisioning of these social services, including in the provision and running of public utilities like transportation, provision of energy, and all that. We also saw them further liberalizing trade, like in the rice sector and retail trade sector, with very negative impact on micro, small, medium enterprises. In terms of means of implementation, funding for social spending was again highly inadequate. Social protection programs remained fragmented. And even in terms of the monitoring, they were doing largely bean counting of inputs, how many beneficiaries who got their services, how much money was spent, rather than looking at outcomes and impact. Did it really redound to reducing poverty? Was inequality decreased? These big picture questions were sidestepped. In terms of engaging the government in the VNR process, the VNR1 and VNR2 report of the Philippine government had much more significant participation of CSOs. For the last VNR, VNR3, it was we were much more excluded. We were not really given as much space, and quite frankly, we really only saw the finished product at the end of the day. So there were a lot of issues and challenges that I could continue to talk about maybe during the open forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marvi. As I said, Philippines and Indonesia are only two countries, 3 times the VNR. You briefly mentioned about the difference. I don't know whether it's improvement or changes. VNR 1, 2, 3. Maybe you can discuss later on. Okay, let's go to Vietnam law, and then we come to Indonesia. Hopefully, we can see Indonesia, Philippines. We can compare. Let's go to Vietnam law.
Okay. Hope that you hear me well. Okay. Can you all hear me well?
Oh yes, we can hear you.
Okay. 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 Greeting from Vietnam, and thanks for having me today. It's such an honor because today is also the National Independence Day of Vietnam. And regarding about the VNR process of Vietnam, I would like to address the assessment from our side. So my name is Long, and I'm the SDG and Innovation Program Manager of SD, which is the Management and Sustainable Development Institute, and the Secretariat of the Live No One Behind Vietnam Partnership. And we have been actively engaged in the VNR development process of the Vietnamese government. And from our perspective, we can assess that the 2023 VNR in Vietnam can be considered as good because firstly, we can see that the structure of the VNR has been revised in comparison to the 2018 to follow each of the specific target of the SDG, rather than just a session of review the existing policies and the achievement. So this time, the structure of the VNR aims to reach a conclusion about the pros and cons, rather than only providing the general observation about the policies. So, and this new approach ensures the comprehensive coverage of the SDG, addressing the previous issue of missing information. Secondly, this time report incorporates the data from various Vietnamese CSO, including ones such as LNOB Vietnam Partnership, This is a paradigm shift from the 2018, in which the Ministry of Planning and Investment only seek for our consultant and input at the very last stage of the VNR. We share the same experience with Cambodia and Philippines before. Only like at around the very last stage of the VNR did we see the final draft. And basically at that time, like it's already the finalized version of the government. And however, for this time, we have been engaged from the early step of the VNR process, of the development process, and we have been actively engaged throughout the developing process. And we collaborate with the Ministry of Planning and Investment and play as an advisory role, facilitating workshop with experts from CSO to consult the authority when needed. To be more detailed, we collaborated with the Ministry of Planning and Investment to hold a workshop with CSO from distinct fields such as like environment, education, to consult them specifically to talk about the first draft of the VNR when the first draft was released. And then after that, we have a second workshop with CSO specializing in the children sector. And we also invite children and youth, including children with disability, to come to the consultation workshop to discuss about the VNR and to record their perspective. However, that said, when we were engaged in the process until the second draft of the VNR, in which we were also asked to input many case study of the CSO activities, CSO practices. However, when the VNR came to the final draft step to be released to the in the high level political forum, we didn't see the final version. We only saw until the second draft. And in the final version of the VNR, unfortunately, all the case studies that we have input in the draft has not been incorporated in the final VNR. Only very brief introduction of the name of the case study that have been verified by the government or from only really selected CSO. So this engagement has encountered very many, even though there's many like significant improvement from the last VNR process, but we can see that there are still many obstacles along the way, such as the quality of the input data and the necessity to wait for the launch of VNR. Because we can see that it is really difficult for the government to verify the information that CSO input in the VNR, because they cannot manage or they cannot have a thorough perspective to evaluate the assessment of the CSO case study. Therefore, we think that it's important to cultivate the trust between the governmental bodies and the VNO to underscore the need of mutual confidence and a mutual evaluation mechanism for data provided by CSO could be beneficial for both government and CSO. So this could have to ensure the data provided by CSO to make it more legitimate and recognized by the government. And more importantly, CSO that were consulted by the authority make a really stride in the VNR engagement process. But it is advised that both sectors should have more in-depth conversation to ensure the involvement of CSO from the early step, but also until the very last step of the VNR process. So that is a really brief assessment from our side.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Very clear. We have a lot of challenges at the same time. Keep lessons from this process, especially the engaging with the data and so on. If we have more participants, let me repeat once again. So we're session, we are going to discuss three issues. One is voluntary national review, which is official process. Number two is independent CSO monitoring, people scorecard. The last three question is, as you know, it will be a UN SDGs summit, second summit, 18th and 19th of November, after September. So we are going to adopt political declaration. So we are going to discuss this political declaration, CSO group. So result of this discussion, we will make a recommendation to ASEAN Summit.
ASEAN Summit. Oh, sorry. Okay. So that we can mainstream this SDG into ASEAN program. Okay, it's okay now. All right, so we will continue. As you know, this year, 5 countries participate the VNR from Southeast Asia. There is a Brunei, Cambodia, and Singapore, Timor-Leste, and Vietnam. Okay, and then now let me invite our friends from Indonesia, maybe also Timor-Leste, to share, your experience, especially the Indonesia, and we go to Timor-Leste. Okay, you have a floor.
Okay. Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Angelica. I'm from International NGO Forum on Indonesian Development, or in short, INFIT. I'm representing Indonesia, and then I'm going to share the VNR process and what we think of the process itself. So just in general, the government of Indonesia has conducted 3 times of VNR. So the first one in 2017, the next one is 2019, and the last time we submitted is in 2021. So throughout these VNR processes, INFIT has participated in at least the FGD processes, and also the public consultation processes, and also we submitted several best practices. And Indonesia was supposed to submit their 4th VNR this year, but maybe it's nearing the presidential election, so they kind of like hold the VNR process. So that's why this year INFIT does not really participate in the VNR discussion, because Indonesia just doesn't submit, right? So in our review, the VNR process just in general was far more inclusive in 2017, because at that time CSO participation was a bit more meaningful, because then we can directly have a discussion with the government, and then we can ask for like their report, we can ask for direct engagement. But this participation, this TSO participation kind of decreasing over time due to the pandemic, because public consultation suddenly was moved to online, and then you know that the online engagement was not really kind of like effective. And then what we see is that the CSO participation just in general was mostly we were asked to submit best practices, which at the end of the day we were not sure whether submitting best practices were effective, as a form of engagement with the government, because then we submit the best practice cases, but then we don't really see how it's being recognized, like at the national level, or whether our best practices is actually being adopted as kind of like at the policy making, or as the and also in other than that, so last week we have an engagement with the SDGs coordinator of Indonesian government. So it was represented by Bapenas. And then in their review is that they claim that for now, Indonesia has reached 63% of the indicators achieved out of the 141 indicators of SDGs, which which is actually quite questionable because the government so far is only focusing on the economic development. And then what we see is that SDG is being used as a justification for economic development because Indonesia for now has the vision towards becoming a developed country in 2045. And then we see that the SDG is kind of like is used as a tool to justify economic development. Okay, we have to use the SDG to improve our digital economy, blue economy, green infrastructure, but it's all about orienting towards economic development. And then I agree with the Philippines that our social spending is also decreasing at the same time. So while our economic is improving, our social spending is decreasing. So this has been like a paradox, right? And then, INFIT right now hasn't really make a formal comment on that. But it's also depending on whether Indonesia will submit the VNR. But in 2019, INFIT participated in the HLPF in New York. And then we were questioning whether the Indonesian government has an effective monitoring processes, including whether the process has been really inclusive. And then because we know Indonesia has kind of like quite a severe data segregation on SDGs. And also at that time, we were questioning about the SDGs financing mechanism and stuff. So and in the current context of post-pandemic, we will see how the government will kind of like improve the SDGs. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So Indonesia is a very interesting case compared to other countries. Let's go to Timor-Leste. Timor-Leste was the second time, right? The VNR this year.
Thank you very much. My name is Coco from the Timor-Leste National NGO Forum, or FUNTIL. Yes, the Timor-Leste CSO, we are a bit lucky because we have conducted 2 times of VNR process that started in 2019. But at the same time, the first time is we are a bit not getting much to attend that high-level political forum because this is related to the visa application process. That's because from Timor-Leste visas to apply in Jakarta and then it's taking a long time and we did not meet the deadline. But this year, the process that we have to the people's scorecard process that we have done, and the PSC process, what we have, it's like because we have a mass meeting that we invited all CSO members and including some of CBOs that we are coming together and try to conduct the PSC process. And Timor-Leste, from the CSO perspective, so we focus on the SDG around SDG number 2, 3, 4, 5, and including the 16. And for this year, so we conducted the PSC and also doing some of the public consultation, and then also included some of the key interview to some of the expert person. That's how we try to collect the data perspective related to this SDG in Timor-Leste. So something that's we consider as a milestone of the implementation of the SDG in Timor-Leste related to the SDG number 16. That now the last years, and we just completed our parliamentary election, and there is very good process because everyone is to go to the vote center and then express their votes and on the peace environment. So it's no more like electoral crime cases or something like that. So this is something that we feel is good. But in terms of the related to the institutional, state institutional related to on how to combat the corruption and the bribery in Timor-Leste. So a few years ago, the government has established Anti-Corruption Commission and also the Ombudsman. That's it's a part on how to look at and doing some mentoring to the party state execution. So it's something is we feel it is good because during it 2021, it's only 4 cases that are registered as a part of the corruption, but it's not like a very big influence because the Anti-Corruption Commission immediately doing some prevention, so that's good. But for this year's, the CSO has involved on to the Timor-Leste delegation to attend this high-level political forum, but separately we also read out our statement to the high-level political forum in a few months ago in New York, and this is the process we have, and then it's not like we are doing the very bad practices, but we still continue to face something related to the judiciary system. There is a lot of the cases still registered, but because related to the limited human resources and something like that, that is not a bit slow on to process the cases in the court. So that is a process, and we continue. But in Timor-Leste for this year's, there's a two team that's and then the government's also asking us to assign the CSO representative to be as a part of the government team, as a part of a technical team that's conducting the assessment for the SDG implementation. But we are also independently doing our process that I mentioned that that the last month that we have to submit our statement in high-level political forum in New York. So, but we continue, and hopefully for the second summit and for this month, maybe in the middle of this month in England. So we are rapidly and to complete it the VNR report, and I hope that we will submit it before the summit is happening in New York. So this is the process we have, and then thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Timor-Leste. Let's move to the Singapore, and also we have a friend from the Brunei. Brunei also the VNR country. First, the Singapore.
Hi, my name is Somin Tan from Think Center. We're a human rights organization in Singapore. I'll just do a sort of brief run through of what the Singapore government reported in their VNR, and just highlight the gaps, the things that they left out. So it won't be a comprehensive list of everything they've left out, but the ones that we know very easily, you can easily look for either in the issues that are currently being discussed in the public sphere or among the civil society itself. So if we look at SDGs 1, 2, and 3, so when we talk about which is the ones that cover poverty, the ones that cover hunger, improve nutrition, sustainable agriculture, and 3 being promote well-being for all and ensure healthy lives. The one thing that sort of cuts into these 3 areas probably would be what was highlighted during COVID-19. So the situation of the migrant workers, basically, just a sort of brief background was, it was discovered that majority of the migrant workers had COVID because they were living in very sort of cramped dormitories, which was not ideal for preventing the spread. So from there, a lot of things, a lot of us, we found out that the situation for migrant workers was it basically highlighted all the gaps that exist, and it's been, the government has sort of vowed to improve, and there has been incremental improvement on the conditions, but it's still lacking in a lot of areas. So in terms of when we talk about poverty, the migrant workers would be the lowest wage earners in the state itself. Whether it's the domestic workers, the foreign domestic workers, or the workers that work in the construction industry or shipyards. Basically, there is no minimum wage, so it can go basically as low as the companies wish to pay them, as long as it's agreed in the contract. And in the issue of food and nutrition, there's also a problem with the industry that uses sort of provides cheap food to the workers. Usually the workers live in dormitories, so the companies would get contracts for cheap food to be supplied to their workers, and usually most of the workers would find that that is not enough, in terms of nutrition or even quality of food. So most of the time we're told that lunch would be, sometimes it's edible, sometimes it's not. So it's a 50-50 for lunch because of the way that they package it. They would supply breakfast and lunch together, and the workers go to work. So after about 8 to 10 hours, then they eat the meal. So there's always that problem. Yeah. And going on, yeah. Going on from that, a few other points would be on SDG 5, when we talk about equality, just some statistics. Our women in our parliament make up about just a little over 29% of the seats, with 8 women ministers out of 37 ministerial positions. And then for SDGs 8 itself, we could refer to this. There was a recent ILO report called Skill to Care, Forced to Work, which basically found that there are about 7% of foreign domestic workers in Singapore are working in forced labor conditions. And then other exploitative labor practices for the migrant workers that I mentioned in the construction and shipyard industries, mainly debt bondage being a problem. And then there's selective enforcement by authorities on which companies to punish. And then SDG 11, we also have the issue of migrant worker housing and population. Usually they're segregated, they're sort of kept away from the rest of the residents from the resident population, so they don't mingle with the rest of the expats and the local residents. SDG 12, sure. And then probably the last one would be the issue of in Singapore, there's still a discriminatory issue on the issue of in law enforcement is the death penalty, where we see a majority of ethnic Malays being ended up on the death row itself. And then the same thing on access for justice for migrant workers and the marginalized. That's still an issue. Yep.
Okay, thank you very much, Singapore. So now let's go to Brunei. Brunei also the second VNR this year. Could you please share briefly about VNR experience?
Thank you so much. Yeah, Anselmo. So this is like an impromptu thing, I'm supposed to be participant. But actually, yeah, I would love to share the status in Brunei when it comes to VNR. By the way, I'm Judy. Yeah, I'm from Project Women Brunei, and I'm here with the regional network we have, which is Weaving Women's Voices in Southeast Asia, or WEAVE. Yeah, so for Brunei, the government has created, the Prime Minister's office has created
a department specifically on sustainable development goal. So there are people there working with the government, and they're putting up the report for the government and monitoring the SDG goals, right? So one specific item that I want to highlight is the SDG 13 on climate action. His Majesty approved for Brunei to host the ASEAN Climate Change Action Center, ACC, ACCC, ASEAN Climate Change Center, right? So Brunei is hosting that, and His Majesty approved that. So that's the center for ASEAN to do research on climate change and other climate change related policy recommendations for ASEAN. So that's really good that we're committed to that. So we have an SDG group, and we have the climate, the ACC Center being hosted by Brunei. At the same time, government has engaged a lot of civil society to report activities and identify which specific SDG goal are we contributing towards. Like for Project Women Brunei, we identify that we are really good in terms of contributing to SDG 1, which is zero poverty. We are doing also SDG 5, which is gender equality, SDG 8 for decent work, SDG 10 for reducing inequalities, and SDG 16 for access to justice. So the rest of other NGOs are also required to do that. Like, what are your activities? And please come up with the list of your activities contributing towards the accomplishment of the sustainable development goals in the Brunei context. Yeah. So far, that's the status at the moment in Brunei. Yeah. We're quite empowered. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let's go to now, we have the guiding question number 3 is about our comment on the political declaration of SDG Summit. But before that, I want to invite Paniro once again, because his intervention very short, but he was not able to use a PowerPoint. He made a PowerPoint, but so could you please briefly, 2 minutes, a little bit more about Malaysia?
Yeah. Just I'll be sharing about the VNR process as well as the scorecard as well, Prof. Okay. So in terms of Malaysian experience, as I said before, the journey was actually a bit smooth with my current boss, Dr. Denison Jayasuriya. Once there is a declaration about SDG in UN, we actually quickly formed the Malaysian CSO SDG Alliance in 2015, where a group of around 80 CSOs, CBOs came together in championing SDGs. So once that is formed, then they become the pillar in terms of championing SDG on the ground. And we try to map our current activities to the SDGs. And then when it comes to government intervention, the government also spelled it out in a very well manner, where there is a national steering committee in terms of SDG was formed, chaired by the Honorable Prime Minister. And then there was a cluster committees which was formed in terms of monitoring, and then the government's Department of Statistics was appointed in terms of monitoring the indicators. And we have a special unit under the Economic Planning Unit, which was formed as a SDG unit to actually champion the SDG at the government level. But just that one setback that even until now we have is that the SDGs are actually managed by ministries in a very specific way. Like, for example, SDG on education is managed by Ministry of Education. SDG on health managed by Ministry of Health. But as we all know, SDG is cost-cutting in nature all the while. So that's the only setback. But in terms of indicator, they are very clear. They have these ministries managing it. And then further that, we have our first VNR in 2017. But where this Malaysian CSO SDG Alliance play a very crucial role in actually doing this VNR. We did have the focus group discussion with CSOs and so on, and then we submitted the report. It's a very the government allowed us in terms of submitting the report, but at the time, due to COVID, we are unable to review the draft report. So that was a setback in 2017. But after that, the commitment from the government as well as Parliament, we actually formed our all-party parliamentary group Malaysia on Sustainable Development Goal. It's a bipartisan initiative and also a multi-stakeholder engagement initiative in terms of championing and also localizing SDG. So the main purpose of the forming of APPM SDG in Malaysia is to localize SDG at the grassroots level in terms of research, in terms of policy, in terms we are now giving input to government in terms of what the people need in terms of SDG. And in 2021, our second VNR, it actually very encouraging participatory. I call it because the Malaysian CS to SDG Alliance played a very crucial role in actually mapping all the SDGs. But as we know, Malaysia scored very well in terms of most SDGs. But a bit low in terms of environmental SDGs, very low in terms of SDG 16. This is due to corruption and all at the time that is took place, as well as I think I got the scorecard report here, where we actually scored, so SDG 16 due to actually lack of collaborative efforts from the agencies as well, where we have local agencies working in a bit silo type of nature. But when it comes to problem is always cross-cutting. We need a multi-stakeholder engagement in terms of solving the problem. But agencies are actually not into that. So that actually bring down LPF actually by 4 of our local government. So this is through another organization called Urbanist Malaysia. So they facilitated the reporting, and four local government actually presented the VLR voluntary local report at the HLPF this year. Okay, that's actually a huge breakthrough in terms of SDG implementation in Malaysia. And as we all know, the government also fairly into this, as the Malaysian plan, our 5-year plan, is actually drafted in line with SDGs, and our annual budget as well being actually drafted and implemented according to SDG monitoring as well. Just that our setback in terms of VNR, the indicators are still very shallow, as we have available indicators but being used for proxy data. So that actually, which is a bit questionable in terms of reporting, when it's not the actual data that we're using. But at least we have increased the data availability up to 80% now, with DOSM and all coming into picture of monitoring things, and APPM playing another parallel role in terms of supplementing and also complementing the data to the government through our programs actually. Okay, that's perfect.
Congratulations, Malaysia. Very impressive. So now let's move to the last question. But because of delay in the opening, let's have about maybe 5 or 10 more minutes. It's okay? Okay. So now, last question. I want to invite the Wanun from Thailand. She has been very much committed to SDG, particularly SDG 13 climate. So Wanun, could you please share your view about this political declaration? What is missing? And what are the key challenges for CSO? Wanun, please.
Thank you very much, Anselmo, and thank you for having me here to share some of the thoughts. I've had a look at the draft final political declaration, and I think it's very, very business as usual. And also we have seen the flavor and also the smell of how to engage the private investments. Am I hearing okay? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very clear.
So we have seen that there has been putting a lot of focus on private financing, and also relying on the SDG implementation and achievement and progress from multilateral development banks. And those include, for example, World Bank, IMF, and also the ADB. And also, you have also seen some of the languages in the political declaration on the fact that developing countries are facing a lot of challenges, especially on the finance. So we need to scale up the finance. So one way to look at the finance is also where the finance is coming from. How are we mobilizing the finance, right? So if I could give the example of the climate finance. So the language in the political declaration has been really blur and also diluting the concept and also the principle of the UNCCC, the Climate Convention. So it doesn't really say that developed countries have their obligation or the commitment to provide the climate finance on a grant basis to developing countries. So it says like we are in this world and we need to achieve the SDG and we need to address the climate impacts, and it's the responsibility of all. It's kind of that language. So it does in terms of the differentiation of countries and also the different common but differentiated responsibilities have been blurred and addressed in the political declaration. And that is one thing to look in terms of the scale of the finance. Yes, we need the finance, but finance must be on the grant base, especially for the climate action. And now let's look at the access of the finance. It doesn't say who can get the access. It will be the same and old stories that the intermediaries would have a direct access to the finance to be provided in the future. What about those on the ground who are at the climate impact forefront, or those who have already been left behind, or those who have been already furthest to be reached out? So it doesn't really mentioning in terms of we need to provide a direct access to those who've been the most vulnerable. So that bit part in terms of the access is missing. And also, they are talking about the VNR process that we've been talking right now as well. The political statement says that the VNR process is quite good to give a progress of the country on where are they making progress on the SDG implementation. But I think we need to look at, we have already heard from many countries, which Thailand also shares some of those comments and analysis as well. If you read, for example, and have a look at the VNR of countries, it's more or less like a beauty contest as well. Maybe it's time for us to look at some other ways for the accountability tools or mechanism at the UN body or at the HLPF. So we might need to have it more a more stronger accountability mechanism rather than having just only the VNR process. So maybe we could think of the UPR process, maybe Anselmo, we know about that. It's compulsory. And then if we can make the SDG commitment as a compulsory, that might make it better, not just like the beauty contest. And the last thing is on, my last thing is on how the political statement is also putting a lot of recognition to the private engagement, corporations engagement as well, not just only on the finance, but also on the world, on we need to move into greener and also cleaner world where you are addressing both all the dimensions of sustainable development, like the environment, social, political, and also economic dimensions. So they are now looking at the private sector, who are like Indonesia and also the Philippines have already said, it's really, really gearing towards facilitating the investment of the private sector into helping achieving the SDG and as well the climate actions. So we now seen a number of countries, as for some cases and some cases from the country level, in terms of the climate action, you've seen that a lot of countries are now gearing for net zero, which is a totally false solutions. And also many countries are also implementing the carbon trading, which is also getting the money from the private sector. And they're buying off their responsibility of reducing the emissions at the source of emission. So we have seen that has been in there in the political declaration. Very, very last thing. They're also mentioning about the new structure of the finance, new a reform of financial structure institutions. And I think it's already too early to say and to put it in the political declaration as well, because the idea of this new reform on the financial structure partly is also coming from the Bridgetown Initiative, which was tabled and presented 2 years ago during the COP in Glasgow. So after that Bridgetown Initiative, there have many versions and also analyses and also proposals that has been built upon the Bridgetown Initiative. So I think it's more or less a number of discussions are still going on. So maybe the institutions and the UN need to welcome all those different reviews first before it jump into the conclusion and put it as a declaration that there should be something around debt suspension due to the disasters, for example. And also they're talking as well on under this financial reform that there needs to be a lot of swap for swap for climate, debt swap for climate, debt swap for SDG, and debt swap for food security. So that means rather than a country paying for the debt, the country can use that debt service or debt payment services to support the food and also the programs on food for climate and so also for implementation of the SDG. But that is also, as I said earlier, that the debt swap is also a deviation from the climate and also from the delivery of the finance to developing countries on a grant base. I think I'll stop now. I hope that helps. Thank you, Anselmo. I don't hear anything.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
I hope we will organize another webinar after SDG Summit to analyze, final declaration, its implication for our future actions, maybe at the end of this month. Okay, so is there any more who wants to give a comment? Marivik, would you like to give us some comment on political declaration? Very short, 1 or 2 minutes.
Yeah, just very briefly. I think that the current historical conjuncture about escalating international tension between, China and the US needs to be addressed, because the ripple effect in many other parts of the world is being much more felt. The economic war waged by the US against China, because they see China as a technological and economic threat, and many steps are being undertaken, not just economically, but militarily. And many of the countries now are being compelled to align themselves either for China or for the US. And I think that now more than ever, we need to strengthen SDG 16, which is to build and strengthen peace institutions and build a momentum around peace. If in Europe, there is the flashpoint around Ukraine, right now in our part of the world, in Southeast Asia, the threat around some cataclysm in Taiwan is within the next few years is something to really watch out for. And so I think we need to also start to talk about building a much more robust peace movement and get countries to work around a kind of non-aligned movement 2.0, because the call of the times are rather urgent and require it. I'll end there.
Okay, thank you very much. Marivik, very insightful comments. As you know, the many countries, ASEAN and also South Korea, we are compelled to decide, people, are you in favor of Ukraine or Russia? Or are you in favor of US or China, So that's why, as you rightly said, non-aligned, and around the global universal agenda like SDG and the human rights and also climate, I think that's the role of civil society, We don't take a side, We are working for common, the goal, That's why I think SDG become even more important, Okay, because time is very limited, I want to pick up 1 or 2 points our future agenda. And Malaysia spoke about VLR, voluntary local review, because all the countries except Myanmar already at least once a voluntary national review, but some countries now they're going down, the local review, I think that's our future agenda, how to bring down the SDG global agenda into local. Okay, that's number one. Number two, I was in New York with Vanon and few others. I was very surprised. This is a voluntary national review means the national government, right? But for the first time, European Union presented the report. It's not VNR, right? So we need a new name, Voluntary International Organization Review, something. So can you ask ASEAN? Can you ask ASEAN to present ASEAN SDG report like a European Union? Yes. You see? So what is the name? The VAR, Voluntary ASEAN Review, If you like football, VAR means the video assisted review, right? So we need a VAR. Can you say that we can put in the recommendation to ASEAN, present ASEAN SDG reports, and then we can engage at the ASEAN level, Okay, so this is new. I didn't know. I discovered in New York, European Union. I will share with you. If you write down your email address or write to me later, I will share the report. Okay, so in terms of conclusion, I want to suggest the two recommendations. Number one, as I said, we ask ASEAN to present ASEAN SDG reports. Okay. Number two, more local government to participate voluntary local review. This is a website. And then if you add one more, we have SDG and then VNR. We have a human rights UPR, Universal Periodic Review in Geneva, as Tong Min Tam said. And also we have a climate, climate government supports NDC, nationally determined contribution. So these are the three reporting mechanisms. Okay, so we can ask all the ASEAN governments and also Timor-Leste and also National Development Plan and also ASEAN Development Plan in line with the three global norms, the SDG and then human rights UPR recommendation and then climate, so the alignment, coherence, Okay, so this can be our advocacy work in the future. Three, Number one, ASEAN SDG report. Number two, local VLR, and third one is triple alignment, climate, SDG, and human rights, Is it okay? So we put this agenda, recommended to SDG, and hopefully we can continue to work together. We can have an independent CSO ASEAN. So we put all together your national report. There's the idea of the people scorecard, If you can bring all scorecard, we can produce independent ASEAN SDG report, Is okay? Okay, let's do it, So thank you very much for your contributions, especially all our Marivik, Wanun, and Long, and the Sin. Thank you for your contribution. Let's continue work. Let's give a big hand to the speakers. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So I have two more chocolates for those who have not taken. Chocolate, This is from Korea, the speakers. So let's have a quick photo in the banner. Oh, one more, yes. Yeah.
Take photo.
Okay, let's have one group photo. Okay, thank you very much, all our technicians. We made it.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.